You paid for me. Now do it. The cowboy did it. And then he got a wife. West Texas, September 1870. The auction block in San Saba County wasn't much more than a wagon bed dragged into the yard of the livery stable. But it served its purpose. The war had been over 5 years, yet some debts still got paid in flesh when the banks wouldn't listen. Ellie Mae Carver stood barefoot on the rough planks, wrists tied with baling twine, because the iron cuffs had been sold for whiskey money. 19 years old, hair the color of winter wheat, eyes the green of creek moss after rain. Her dress had once been blue. Now it was the color of dust and despair. The auctioneer, a sweating man named Polk, spat tobacco and hollered, "Healthy girl, good teeth, raised on a farm. Can cook clean, so, and birth babies if the Lord willing. $10 opens it." 10 became 8, then 5. Men shifted their boots and looked away. Nobody wanted the trouble that came with a girl whose father had died owing the wrong people. From the back corner of the yard came a low, steady voice. 20. Every head turned. Levi McAllister leaned against the corral fence, hat brim low, coat worn soft at the elbows. 32, broad to the shoulders, quiet the way a man gets when he spent too many nights alone with cattle and stars. He ran a small spread 30 miles west, 2,000 acres, one hired hand, and a reputation for minding his own business. Polk blinked like Christmas had come early. 20 once, twice, sold to Levi McAllister. Ellie didn't flinch when the twine was cut, and she was shoved forward. She landed hard against Levi's chest. He caught her by the elbows to keep her upright. Up close she smelled smoke on his coat and coffee on his breath. She looked him dead in the eye and said, "Clear as creek water, you paid for me. Now do it." A ripple went through the crowd, some laughter, some shocked gasps. Levi's face didn't change. He touched the brim of his hat to Polk, took Ellie by the upper arm, gentle but firm, and led her to where his bay gelding waited. He tossed her up side saddle, mounted behind her, and rode out without another word. They didn't speak for 10 miles. The sun was bleeding red across the mesas when he finally reined in at a creek crossing. He swung down, lifted her off the horse like she weighed nothing, and cut the last of the twine from her wrist with his pocket knife. "You can run if you've a mind to," he said, voice low. "I ain't chasing you." Ellie rubbed the raw skin and studied him. "Where would I run to, mister? My people are dead, and the bank took the farm. You bought the only thing I owe me." He looked away, jaw working. "I bought your freedom, not your body. Difference matters." She gave a short, bitter laugh. Men say a lot of pretty things after they hand over cash. Levi untied a burlap sack from his saddle and pulled out a folded bundle. Clean denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, a pair of socks still wrapped in brown paper. "My sister left these when she married and moved to Kansas. They'll fit you better than that rag." He laid them on a flat rock. "I'll turn my back. You change and wash if you want. I'll start supper." He walked 20 yards downstream and built a small fire without looking back once. Ellie stared at the clothes, then at the creek, then at the broad back turned to her. Something cracked open in her chest. Small, careful, like ice breaking on a March pond. She changed quick, rolled the 2 long pants at the cuff, and waded knee-deep into the cold water just to feel clean for the first time in a month. When she walked back, hair dripping, Levi handed her a tin cup of coffee and a plate of beans and cornbread without comment. They ate in silence. Night insects started their chorus. Somewhere a coyote yipped. Ellie set her plate down. "You aiming to be noble, Mr. McAllister?" "Levi." "You aiming to be noble, Levi?" "I'm aiming to sleep," he said. "You can have the bedroll. I'll take the saddle blanket." She studied him across the fire. "I wasn't raised to take charity." "You weren't raised to be sold, either," he answered, soft but sure. "We're both a long way from how we were raised." That shut her up 3 weeks later. The ranch was nothing fancy. Log house, pole corral, a windmill that sang when the breeze was right. Levi's hired hand, an old vaquero named Jesus, raised one eyebrow at a girl riding double behind his boss, but asked no questions. Levi gave Ellie the loft room, carried up a real feather mattress himself, and told her the kitchen was hers to run as she pleased. Then he went back to work sunrise to sunset. Like always, Ellie cooked, scrubbed, mended shirts, and waited for the other boot to drop. It never did. He never touched her, never raised his voice, never came to her room at night. At first she was relieved. Then she was confused. Then, though she'd have died before admitting it, she was angry. One October evening, she cornered him in the barn while he curried the bay. "You planning to keep me like some stray, kid you feed, but don't name?" Levi kept brushing. "You got a name. You know what I mean." She stepped closer. "You paid $20. Most men would have collected by now." He stopped, turned, looked at her full in the face for the first time in days. "I ain't most men." "No," she said, voice trembling with something between fury and fear. "You're worse. You make me owe you every single day, and you won't even take what's owed." His eyes darkened. "You think that's what I want? To take?" "I think you're scared," she shot back. "Scared of me? Scared of wanting? Scared you'll turn into the kind of man who buys girls?" The curry comb hit the floor. In 2 strides he was in front of her, big hands on her shoulders, not rough, just holding her still so she had to look at him. "I'm scared," he said, raw as a fresh brand, "that if I ever touch you before you ask me with your whole heart, I'll hate myself till the day I die. And I already got enough hate for one lifetime." Ellie's breath caught. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind rattling the tin roof. Then she rose on her toes and kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It was teeth in anger and gratitude and terror all at once. When she pulled back, her lips were swollen and her voice shook. "That your whole heart asking?" he rasped. "It's a start," she whispered. He rested his forehead against hers. "Then we'll go slow as you need. But Ellie Mae? Yeah. I ain't never letting you go back to that wagon bed. Not ever." Winter came hard that year. They learned each other the way you learn a skittish horse. One quiet truth at a time. She discovered he couldn't read worth a lick. He'd missed school chasing cattle for his daddy. So she taught him letters by lamplight, her finger tracing words while snow tapped the window. He discovered she woke screaming some nights, dreaming of the auction block. He learned to hold her, without speaking, until the shaking stopped. On Christmas Eve, he rode to town and came back with a preacher half drunk on holiday cheer. Jesus stood witness, grinning like a fool. Levi took Ellie's cold hands, his callous ones, in front of the fireplace and said the plainest vows a man ever spoke. "I got nothing but a half-wild ranch and a heart that's been broke too many times. But what I got is yours, Ellie Mae Carver, if you'll have it." She cried so hard the preacher had to wait twice before she could get out, "I will." After the preacher left, Levi carried her over the threshold of the bedroom that had never been as alone. Later, much later, lying tangled in quilts with moonlight striping the floor, Ellie traced a scar along his ribs and whispered, "You paid for me, and then you gave me a name again." He kissed her temple. "You gave me one back." Spring Roundup, 1871. Word travels slow on the plains, but it travels. One afternoon a stranger rode in, fancy vest, city boots, a banker's smile. Turned out Ellie's uncle in Missouri had died and left her $400 and a trunk of her mother's things. The banker laid the draft on the table, like it was gold plate. "All you have to do is sign Miss Carver, and you're a free woman with money in her pocket." Ellie stared at the paper a long time. Levi stood by the door, hat in his hands, face unreadable. Finally she looked up. "Ma'am was my mother's name. I'm Mrs. McAllister now." She pushed the draft back across the table. "Send the money to the mission school in San Antonio. Tell him to teach girls to read, so no man ever puts them on the block again." The banker left stammering. That night Levi found her on the porch swing, wrapped in an old quilt. "You could have gone anywhere," he said quietly. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I did. I came here." He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of wood smoke and prairie wind that was home now. Years later, folks riding through would see the sign nailed above the gate of the prettiest little ranch in the county. L. and E. McAllister. No trespassing, but coffee's always on. And if they asked how a quiet cowboy and a girl one sold for $20 built all that, old Jesus would just grin, roll a cigarette, and say, he paid for her once. Then she paid for him every day after. That's how you buy a wife worth keeping. And under the stars that never asked for papers or prices, Levi and Ellie McAllister slept sound, two hearts finally truly free.